Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates. An article in the New York Times by Yashica Dutt, also the author of Coming Out as a Dalit, has caught a lot of attention both in India and abroad. It shines a light on the hard reality of caste discrimination where you would least expect it: Silicon Valley and the big tech companies of the United States. Yashica has often through her writings made the point that caste bias is so entrenched that it does in fact exist in all of those urban spaces, educated spaces, seemingly enlightened spaces that you would think it doesn't exist. In this case, the article in the New York Times is about California regulators actually bringing a lawsuit against the tech giant CISCO after a Dalit engineer complained about caste discrimination at the hands of his so-called upper caste, in other words, Brahmin managers. Yashica joins us from New York today. Yashica, thank you for that piece. I found it absolutely fascinating, and I actually had no idea till you actually wrote it. What I found even more compelling in your piece was your revealing that 67% of Dalits in the Indian Diaspora in the United States of America have spoken about experiencing this caste discrimination. Why then is this almost the first time that we're actually hearing about it at this level?
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Barkha. And this is quite a revealing statistic. 67% Dalits have claimed that they've faced workplace harassment. And it's been put out by Equality Labs, Dalit Civil Rights Organization in the United States. But even beyond that statistic, I spoke to about 30 Dalit tech and health and education workers a couple of days ago on a Zoom call, very much like this. And almost each of them said that they had faced workplace harassment, whether it was about them being called out for having availed reservations or affirmative action, as we understand that in the United States, or being asked what temple they attend, or being asked which background they are from. And these might seem like innocuous questions because in India, we're so used to this culture of answering about questions about a caste, questions about a last name, questions about whether we were in the main list in an engineering or a medical college, or we were in the reserved category. But as we understand, and especially in this moment in the US, which is this moment that everyone's calling the Black Lives Matter because this summer so far has been the summer of people going out in the streets, especially Black folk going out in the streets and asking for their rights and really standing up for it. And United States in general having this reckoning of their racial past. And this is also a moment to talk about other kinds of inequalities because race and caste have such parallels as well. So going back to your question about why it hasn't come up so far, it's because the narrative is controlled by almost more than 90% higher caste individuals, and they create a narrative that benefits them. It benefits them to not talk about the harassment that Dalits face, and it also benefits them to say, well, we are the underprivileged ones. Look at how we've struggled, which is certainly true. If the inequalities between United States and India, if you have to move there, all of us have our own share of struggle. But Dalits have to face a struggle of having to prove themselves over and over again.
Now, in this lawsuit that you actually spoke about, the Dalit engineer who brought this complaint of discrimination against his Indian American managers chose to hide his or her identity. I think it's his identity. And you've spoken about how it is important for so many people to actually not come out. And I'm borrowing from the title of your book, where coming out is something we've usually associated with the LGBTQ movement. But in your own case also, you speak about this closet in which particularly urban, educated people like yourselves, maybe people like this engineer who's brought the lawsuit, remain shut because somewhere being privileged ironically means a greater self-consciousness about caste. You can't decide whether to embrace it, reject it. And I'm sure you've experienced that, Tasa.
Yeah, definitely. But I wouldn't say it's a kind of privilege that, Dalits who are able to blend into urban spaces enjoy. It's just a burden more so that we live in. It's something that we have to hide every day. It's a choice that I made every day, whether to talk about my caste. I had to wake up every morning, and it does sound like a lot. Did I actually wake up every morning and think about it? The answer is yes. I did wake up and wonder whether today I will be questioned about what my caste is, whether someone will find out which background I am from. And I'm not just from an SC background. I'm from the Bhangi caste, which is one of the most maligned castes. Manual scavengers in our country are derided. They are sent into manholes without any protective gear. Even in the midst of the COVID pandemic, they're the ones who are the front lines along with health workers, going into manholes and sewers and cleaning our filth without really any protections. So the stigma that comes from being associated with that caste is huge. So
Mm-hmm.
we live in these prisons that are not constructed by so much our minds, but the society that we live in. So we
Yeah.
have a choice whether we can. I could have talked about being a Bhangi person right from my childhood and face the discrimination that I knew would certainly come my way, or choose to hide it and just not talk about it or lie about it. And it's like if in the note that I wrote 4 years ago in 2016 when I came out as Dalit, was that I had to finally understand that my history was not of shame and it was of pride, that our people are resilient and they have faced so much, and yet we continue to thrive in a society that categorically doesn't want us to. They don't want us to be educated. They don't want us to have the kind of same rights, even though on paper we do. But in reality, when Dalits are still being murdered, that news that broke out just yesterday about that Dalit family, the heartbreaking news where they decided to drink pesticide
Mm-hmm.
because their crops were being sprayed with chemicals, and the kids are crying. I've not been in that position, but I associate with that trauma.
Yeah.
And I
So,
think all of us as Dalits.
so I should say that I was not trying to diminish, in a sense, the struggles that you've gone through because you have some protection of class. But the point I was trying to make was, and you could walk me through this, is that class and caste do intersect in peculiar ways. So your privilege will give you no protection necessarily against caste, but if you're poor and you're Dalit, then you're likely to face a double jeopardy. And that's, in
Absolutely.
fact, you spoke about, being a Bhangi and being from the community that cleans our manholes and our sewage pipes. And just a few days ago, I was in a community, a colony in Delhi, where the people actually do that for a living. And they were speaking about the double discrimination in the age of COVID, where in any case, people would not let them touch anything in their homes. And now they just keep a distance from them. They don't even give any work. So even though that work in some ways has robbed them of their dignity, now they don't even have that work. So there is, so that's what I really want you to talk about. This imagined idea that we have, that Yashica goes to the United States of America, or somebody else goes and joins Cisco, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and suddenly this problem goes away. And what your piece in the New York Times is really saying is, no, I may not be abjectly poor. I may not be that couple in Madhya Pradesh that drank pesticide while my children had to watch me doing that. But there is still ignominy and discrimination in my life, even here in New York or on the West Coast, even in California. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, class and caste are very different, and we've had to sort of help everybody else around us understand that idea for a while. And when I say we, I just speak in a collective, the Dalit community. And of course, caste doesn't go away when we become middle class, so to speak. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
abjectly middle class. I don't have the kind of money to exist in the United States. The only reason I do is because I was able to come here on a scholarship. And so that idea that just because you are in the US, that means either you're extremely privileged or extremely wealthy. Well, privileged, yes, but wealthy totally not. And in terms of how our class affects our caste, there are so many examples. Like take reservation, for example. That kind of idea that you don't belong where you are and you're constantly stopped from your promotions, like what happened to the Dalit engineer, or you're constantly told that you don't deserve to be in the space, or you are abjectly discriminated against in the workplace. Those are all issues that happen in the middle class. We're not talking about our manual scavenger brothers and sisters coming and joining us in corporate offices. They are separate issues, but that, you know, we still have to give them the same kind of attention that we give other issues, because in rural spaces, caste is visible because it's impossible to ignore. But in urban spaces, especially, caste has gone unnoticed for so long because this whole idea that just because you're from a certain class, you're not going to be discriminated. But we have countless examples where people won't, you know, have food with us, myself included, won't invite us to the same events, or, you know, especially when they're religious or, you know, Hinduism related events like a temple attendant or, you know, just a community gathering. And there are discriminations that are rife at every level. So class issues with caste are entirely different but equally serious, as you know, we would find in rural areas or lower
now
class.
your New York Times piece quotes a study which shows that more than 90% of those of migrants from India are of I hate using this phrase upper caste. I just don't know what to call it. That's why I keep saying
Upper
so-called upper caste.
castes, quote
Upper
unquote
caste,
upper
yes,
caste.
quote unquote. But it's an important statistic, and which is why I quote it, because you are talking about that sense of being marginalized numerically. Now, when you did a Zoom call with others in the Dalit community, what was some of the examples of discrimination that you found, and what sort of workspaces are we talking about?
Works. So I just want to come back to the 90% statistic. And I think it's really important to understand that almost 25% of the country's population is so severely underrepresented in this so-called first world country. Well, the reason for that is that who gets to migrate? You know, it's not, we don't have a border with the United States. We can't just come over. In order to be able to come to this country, you need to have a lot of resources. And as Dalits, handful of us do, most of us don't. Even for me to be able to come here, it was a struggle. I had to really work hard to even gather money for the plane ticket, to be honest, to make this voyage. So the fact that we have 90% or more upper caste people in the United States clearly shows the kind of income disparity that exists and the disparity in opportunity that exists in our country. Who gets to come here and sort of avail of this opportunity, and who has to remain back home? And that shows that 90% people who are able to do that are only upper castes. And in terms of the experiences, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people talked about how their workplaces are an issue. Somebody talked about a consulting firm that I don't want to go on record with, but they pretty categorically called that consulting firm a desi consulting firm. And what they meant was that it is so Indian in its hierarchical structure, in its patriarchal structure, in its caste structure, that it feels like you never left India. Somebody spoke about how one person hired a Muslim candidate, and they were asked by the manager, who was an upper caste Hindu man, to not do that. They were asked if they couldn't find someone else. And that kind of issue, you know, in India, we've unfortunately normalized that kind of attitude. But in the United States, where diversity laws are pretty strong, especially after the civil rights movement, and discrimination laws are paid a lot of serious attention to, that is something we just cannot do. But you know, Indians in the United States bring that attitude, which stems from caste, extended to religion, and even race. There is a lot of anti-blackness within the Indian American community that has been addressed in the US even in the past month or so.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was a student at Columbia, Meera Nair's Mississippi Masala had just come out, and it dealt with this kind of hypocrisy that you go in as this community that faces discrimination for being brown, but you don't think twice about discriminating against you know, people who are Black. Now, I want to ask you finally, one of the really important points that your piece actually makes is that American diversity law does not recognize caste as a basis of discrimination. And that's why this lawsuit is actually so important. What are you hoping to achieve, other than, of course, shining a light on this issue? What should people here home in India understand about what kind of discrimination Dalits go through in America, and how does American law need to adapt to this?
So I think, first of all, people should take this out of their mind that caste went away just because we crossed the 7 seas. That did not happen. We did not leave caste behind. There is this amazing Ambedkar quote that we all have, at least in the Dalit community, familiar with. I've used it in the piece, that says that Indians will carry caste with them, paraphrasing it a little bit, wherever they go. And they have done that. The community structures look exactly the same. I'll just want to talk about this show that became really popular on Netflix, Mindy Kaling's show, Never Have I Ever. There's a really pivotal scene in there in which a woman who marries a Muslim man is basically ostracized. And they deal with it in a very cavalier manner that, well, too bad. That's what happens in Indian communities. And if that's the example of what happens to a woman who marries a Muslim man, they don't address it, but you can only imagine what happens to people who are basically ex-untouchables, people like myself, who probably our castes are visible and don't get access to the same spaces. Because in the United States, as with everywhere else, jobs and opportunities and neighborhoods are based on networks. And those networks are very much caste-oriented. Let's be very clear that caste didn't disappear even for a second. The same structures, it was like somebody took a boilerplate and took it in a plane and placed it in the US. If there are more than 10 Indians in a space, the question is going to come up. So what's your background? What's your last name? Gotra kya hai aapka? Stuff like that. So, so that is always something that we should pay attention to. And just to answer what we should expect, the hope is that caste needs to be recognized as an equal form of discrimination as race is, for example, or religion is. And I just want to highlight Suraj Yengre, my Dalit brother, wrote a really powerful piece in Caravan, and he talked about how systemically on an international level, caste has been kept under wraps by the Indian bureaucracy, by the Indian community. They've always said, well, caste is not like race, so it doesn't need to be paid attention to. And activists, Dalit activists in United States have been fighting for this for 20 plus years, for people to recognize that the discrimination that we face is real. And hopefully this lawsuit in itself will bring attention to that problem. And if it goes further, then, it might change US laws and force workplaces in the entire country to pay attention to, if they have Indian employees, what's the dynamic between them.
Well, thank you for shining a light on this. It really, I mean, if you hadn't written the piece that you did, even me, who thinks of myself as reasonably aware, did not actually know about this lawsuit. So really, thank you. And thank you for your book. It's an extremely powerful memoir. And Yashica, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Barkha.